A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back once again to films I'm willing to talk about again. And so, it's about time that we wrap up the likes of Cars, because Transformers 1 is out and about. I'll make my way over to the theaters. First though, Cars 3. This was the third film that we got in Cars. And while there has been a lot of speculation about a supposed Cars 4 coming around by 2025, there's really no true confirmations by Pixar or anything else. It's probably more likely that, considering how much new material we got from Cars, including the famous cartoons, the stuff with Mater, the plane spin-off, as well as all that other cool stuff that has come around since Cars first came out in 2006, it's more likely that it's just a bunch of other Disney Plus exclusive stuff. They have talked about Cars setting upon an entire new wave of media because of how Cars 3 had impacted a new generation of viewers for Pixar films. And it's probably likely that the case being that Cars 3, first of all, came out more than 10 years after the first film, thereby setting a lot of people's minds with some refreshers. Because after all, a lot of time has since passed. Those of you who were born around the same time as the first film are literally old enough to start voting. But oh boy, I feel like that one's gonna come back to bite me. Come at me, bro. Anyways though, Cars 3 is without a doubt something that some people, compared to Cars 2, actually find to be a lot more enjoyable, but at least does have itself a bit of monotony. Being that there's 3 movies in the series right now, and there's also not that much potential we can get out of this compared to the first film, not only that, but there's also the directorial stuff. Unlike with the other 2 films, Cars 3 was directed by Brian Fee and not John Lasseter, so there's a lot of difference in terms of what we get between this and the other 2 films. The animation's a lot more different as well, but it still does feel like Cars. It just happens to look a lot different when you look at the posters, when you look at some of the trailers. I guess you could say there was just tons of advancements that had come around, thereby allowing the animation to be a lot smoother, a lot more hyper-realistic, and more detailed by any means. But you know what though? One other thing about this is the plot line. Some people might not appreciate what this movie's had to offer, but the way I see it firsthand, it actually is a high significance. And I feel like that, given the material it gave to us, if it could have done even a little bit better, it actually would have been enough to rival the first movie. The success that it brought over in June 2017 might not have exactly been in line, because that same summer there were loads of different movies that came out. I mean, that same month was actually when I saw the Captain Underpants movie. I could thank my half-brother for bringing me along for the ride. My 18th birthday actually was very important, that lots of old friends and family that I hadn't seen for a long time had since come around to see me yet again. I kind of wonder, why hasn't the same thing happened for when I turned 25 this year? I guess maybe with all that's happened, a lot of people have been trying to focus more on trying to get their money together, because inflation and stuff, like, that's ever going to affect any of us? Come on now. We're not in the fuel crisis of 75 or the Great Recession of 2008. None of that BS. Boy, I haven't even started talking about the movie yet. Okay, so from a good standpoint here, we start off much like how we did with the other movie. We get ourselves the usual stuff that comes around in terms of Lightning McQueen and whatnot. We do get to see Radiator Springs yet again, and even with McQueen's new looks, and even with him back on the racetrack once again, having beat Chick Hicks, well, not by racing standards, but more like popularity standards, because he definitely sacrificed his victory to be by rescuing Strip Weathers off the track. And then of course in the second movie, he was not only able to win that series of races, beating Francesco Bernoulli, but also allowing for Mater to defeat those ruthless enemies of the Spies Agency. In this instance, though, it's just the usual mumbo jumbo that comes around with Mater helping to support him, Sally and Doc Hudson and all that good stuff. But it eventually boils down to, how could Lightning stand up to some brand new technology? Jackson Storm, a brilliant new racer, comes around and completely sidelined Lightning, putting out a victory that had not been seen before. It almost goes to the point where Lightning ends up hoping to retire from his work of being a race car and possibly trying to become something different. But in any case, there eventually is a sign of hope that came around. Cruz Ramirez, a yellow car similar in a way to Lightning, but a bit more on the advanced side, much like Jackson Storm, proceeds to take him under her wing in the hopes that he can get some advanced training in terms of racing skills. And while Lightning is eager to try out a certain simulator in order to hone in on whatever skills he needs to accomplish in order to beat Jackson Storm's time, Cruz Ramirez just proceeds to give him more of the fundamentality behind the racing overall that Jackson Storm is more than capable of performing. And while it might not work out too well, thanks to Lightning McQueen not being so good at this stuff, it's just that kind of thing that, of course, Lightning is known to be kind of a jerk character, much like how Sheriff Woody was at times. But in this instance, there just happens to be times where Lightning just doesn't learn that much of lessons. Like in the first movie, he went from being a huge jerk to his crew members. They quit on him. He was left with no help at all. He tried to force Mac to stay awake all night long just so he can get to California ahead of time, thus allowing Mac to accidentally fall asleep on the road. And then, of course, he was pretty bad in mistreating the residents of Radiator Springs, thus causing them to eventually be angry and sad with him, until by the end of the movie, he changes his ways. He realizes that Doc Hudson had an accident after winning 3 Piston Cups. But in this instance, even with the second movie, it's like Lightning just goes back to his old ways. I mean, what's up with that? Why do people, like, go back to their old ways? Is this just habitual stuff? Or is this something completely different? I don't even know. You know what, though? It at least gives us a good chance to understand Cruz Ramirez in a more in-depth detail. Because after some more time passes, some more mistakes are made, some more connectivities made between Lightning and Ramirez, eventually some runs out onto the beach, as well as some runs out onto the road, and even a potential score in mind thanks to a mud derby where Lightning and Ramirez get quite dirty, scoring up the details with a large bus. Oh boy. I mean, this is just the kind of stuff that really gets us going. The kind of action, kind of like when we saw those tractors at Radiator Springs. The same one that Mater would scare with his horn. And then there's that malicious combine that comes around. The equivalent of a raging bull. But much like what we saw then, this bus is kind of on a similar level of crazed. Oh, but you know what though? Apart from references to older movie lore aside, a lot of this stuff here almost feels filler. But it at least does help to pertain to allow for character relationships to grow even bigger, and even more so, to where the real fun begins. Yep. It starts to drive away from Lightning McQueen's hope for victory against Jackson Storm, and instead, he passes the torch to Cruz. Wow. This movie has literally changed. It's changed my life. It has done so many things I never would have imagined. This one in particular, though, passing the torch, that's the one thing I feel like could have been done. It not only saved this movie, it not only does so much to help push the plot forward and even gain an actual victory by the end of the plot itself. The story ending with Ramirez taking the win and Storm being left on the sideline. Yeah. That right there is what you call a smart move. Yep, you heard that right. So smart that it drives all of Einstein, Hawking, and Copernicus's brains out of their skulls and into a pile of donkey doo. So in any case, though, the torch is passed. Ramirez becomes the new Lightning McQueen. And with that in mind, I am done. Officially done with Cars 3. This time I'm not revisiting it again, because I proceed to give this one a scoring of 7.5 out of 10.1. It has all that stuff that you could ever possibly want in a Cars sequel, or what you would at least expect to show up in a Cars sequel. But passing the torch was the ultimate move that in Cars 2, the score could have been way higher had he had given it up to somebody else just as well. On top of all that, Lightning has his own training academy now, thanks to the success of Cruz Ramirez's victory against Jackson Storm. And after everything that we've seen, I seriously hope that Cars 4 comes around. I absolutely want to see it, and I absolutely want to feel it. The true success of a third movie in a franchise can only possibly be bolstered if a fourth film comes around and undertakes it. So with that in mind, I'm done here. I'm going to move on from Cars to Transformers. Unlike what we saw with Michael Bay and Travis Knight, though, this instance we have something entirely different. So I'll see you guys then with my review of Transformers 1.
Whenever I want, I usually get, and I'm thinking I want you, but I don't have you yet. I ain't got no tricks to be playing on you.